Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Latinx Game Festival. I am Venisia Gonzales, and I am one of the co-organizers of the Latinx Game Festival. I am also independently learning to run my own public relations agency, specializing in representing people of color, entitled the Venisia Agency. So far, working title. I am joined by my wonderful guests who are incredible people, and I am so glad to be sharing their knowledge, learning from them, and growing with them today. First, I'm going to introduce Edaleen Cruz, and I am joined by also Jorge Albor and Manny Pérez. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hola a todos. ¿Cómo está?
So I'd like to first start off with our first question today, was what is your experience, your current role, and specific responsibilities? If I can start off with you, Edaleen.
Sure. So, hi, everybody. My name is Edaleen, or Eda. I respond to either one, and I love both. I've been in the industry for 7 years. I recently transitioned out of a role at Blizzard. I'm now a community lead over at Singularity 6. So very, very exciting. I still haven't had my first day with them, so I'll check back in a while after I do that. But my current responsibilities with this new studio are going to be basically setting up what the community team is going to look like, what our day-to-day communications are going to look like, how we're going to communicate with our players, how we're going to track player feedback, and all that fun stuff that comes with launching a brand new IP.
Ooh, I'm liking that. So you haven't started the position yet due to the pandemic?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That is, the pandemic is definitely causing some hiccups for most of us, I'd say, but I like how everybody is learning to adapt. So that's the fun thing too. Jorge, could you tell us about your experience, your current role, and your responsibilities?
I sure can. Yeah. So I am Jorge. I also go by George by some folks. I've been at Ubisoft for a little over 4 years and in the games industry for, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird how you define it. 8 to 10 years, I guess. I work on a variety of different titles, and it kind of depends where we're at in the life cycle of a game. Early on, it might be a lot of campaign strategy work. It might be creator work as we get closer to launch. It might be a lot of project management or asset management. So it really just kind of depends where we're at in the life cycle of the games that we're working on.
And Manny, for you?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm Manny or I'm Emmanuel, whichever. I'm an associate community manager at Bethesda. I've been there 2 years, almost exactly, like 2 more weeks, and it'll be my 2 years. Before that, I did some content creation and writing, so kind of industry adjacent is what I call it. And yeah, at Bethesda so far, I've worked on Rage 2, Wolfenstein Youngblood, Doom, Eternal, and Deathloop. So kind of, helping with our social structure, coming up with social media marketing plans, kind of overlapping with the brand teams and overlapping with the PR teams to kind of make sure we're, rowing the boat all in the same direction, and then helping out, with the events that we have and the marketing beats that sort of revolve around those events as well. So kind of, a lot of different hats, just like all of us here.
That's the one thing that I've learned as a recent graduate. I just graduated with my master's for public relations. And even through the program that I was in at Full Sail University, it was like you learn that when you're in PR that you are wearing various hats, from everything from social media to community to marketing to content creation, and it's trying to learning how to navigate and then finding your way within this industry, whether you're a contractor or a full-time employee. It's like to finding where you want to fit in. So I always like hearing when I speak to someone in this field, you're noticing that you do have multiple hats, and it's just part of the job.
Yeah, for sure.
For one of my questions, I was wondering, for Jorge and Edaleen, whoever wants to go for understanding demographics and behaviors, using this data to cater to specific demographics, especially Latinx gamers. What does this process look like for you in your industry, and how can it evolve?
I can start. So I actually went through a journey with that, and I feel like it's very normal for community managers to kind of start not really wanting to look at the data. For me, for baby community manager Edaleen, it was all about the player feelings. How are they feeling? Are they feeling happy? Are they feeling upset? And you know, that has its place as a community manager, but when I was talking to other teams, specifically to our business analyst and to our marketing folks, they were more interested in numbers. How many people are actually talking about that? And there I was being like, this one person is really angry about something. So how that process started looking for me was kind of just diving deep into the metrics of our social, of where our conversations were happening, looking at how much engagement we were getting at things. And when I started, I actually didn't know how to read the numbers. So I started reaching out to our business analysts and to our marketing people, being like, hey, can you help me understand what exactly it is that these numbers are telling you, and what information from this is valuable to you? So it was a lot of just conversation going back and forth of what exactly mattered to them, what exactly mattered to me as a community manager, and then trying to find the middle ground. I like telling community managers of, like, you know, your project, your studio might have you working independently, but reach out to those people in other teams, because ultimately they have the same goal as that you do, and they're going to help you understand that information better.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a lot of that same sort of goal-oriented perspective that we take when we're looking at demographics and behaviors on our content, right? So something like, you know, are people watching a trailer through the whole thing, or where are they seeing a lot of engagement, or where are they coming back to rewatch a piece of content? That might be able to tell us a little bit about what is resonating with particular set of communities. I mean, I wish I had access to more data. There's actually just a remarkable, I mean, there's a lot of data, but it's remarkable how much more you would want to consume just to learn, you know, what are people really digging about your content. But in terms of, you know, how we work on the day-to-day, really coming back to what our goal is for a particular piece of communication or what we're trying to market is going to probably matter a bit more than, say, you know, trying to look at absolutely everything about behavior on that particular piece of creative.
Okay. And for anyone who would like to answer, when it comes to what metrics do you consider important, like when it comes to measuring social media success? And I mean that in terms of, like, as you advocate for other Latinx on your team or other marginalized folks to make them feel valuable members of the community, what do you consider as those important metrics to measuring their success to include everyone, if anyone can answer?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think, you know, like a metric of inclusivity is an interesting angle, and I think it's a little harder to measure because so much of what we do, you know, I mean, I'll speak to my own experience, but I'm sure you guys do as well. You know, it's like sentiment, right? So like measuring that sentiment is this weird, it's like very intangible. It's not necessarily a number. Although there are, you know, there's software and programs that can measure that sentiment and kind of quantify it. But I think in terms of, you know, through the lens of inclusivity, I think like relatability is a really important one. And I feel like that's one of the things that, you know, any game, any title, any franchise that's working to be inclusive, I think really wants to hit that mark of relatability. You know, using like Spider-Man, Miles Morales as a great example. So many people in the Puerto Rican community saw the Puerto Rican flags in the streets, or they saw the people dancing side to side, and it resonated. And again, in terms of like measuring relatability, I think that's where it's hard. That's where it's tougher. But in terms of like, you know, what I kind of look for in terms of, you know, things that like I can kind of use as a benchmark, I think like that sense of relatability is really important.
Just to hop onto the relatability thing too, a lot of my work also involves working with like YouTubers and creators. And I think Manny's example of Miles Morales in the Spider-Man game, you can see that Latinx community on YouTube went wild, right? They were making videos and they were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways where you could look at, the types of content that are being produced around that sort of moment and look at the metrics. You could look at YouTube videos, you could look at shares, you could look at some of the qualitative data to sort of back that up as you are thinking about, the more sentiment based reactions to that content as well. So you can sort of fall back onto that data once you get a sense of, what are those communities that you're trying to reach and how are they actually reacting to it?
Yeah.
So on my team, my former team, when I used to work with Overwatch, with the Latin American Overwatch community team, I drove the initiative to increase representation of minorities for LATAM, because I was noticing that we were always showcasing the same type of content creators. And I gave a challenge to my entire team. Originally, it was just going to be for Overwatch. My manager kind of asked me to put the challenge for our other franchises as well. And it was just to highlight a specific set of number of people that we usually didn't highlight. And that forced our community managers to kind of not rely on their usual people, to kind of start going out there and looking for more women specifically was something that we were looking to represent more. And for me, it was very difficult to understand what the success was as the program was going. Yes, we did have our goal of like, today we're going to feature, or this month we're going to feature a certain this percentage of content creators that we feature have to be of a minority. I would like to say that I realized that I was successful when I looked at the community groups for Overwatch in Latin America, and I noticed that the biggest ones were actually led by women. That was the point that I was like, oh my God, it worked. And obviously they were the ones putting in the hard work and whatnot, but it was still pretty awesome to see that happen, and to see the conversation turn from toxic to, the community started seeing as, yeah, they have a space here, they belong here. So pretty cool.
I like that. I always find it shocking. I mean, I can't say pretty shocking, but I always find it interesting when people find it that there's not a lot of, they'll make comments that there's not a lot of women in the gaming industry. And it's like the numbers are there. There's plenty of women. There's plenty of women-led communities, especially on Discord. And it's wonderful to see where everyone is supporting each other. You're seeing healthier communities when you're learning to accept all the different people that are in it. So that makes me happy. What advice do you have on how to retain your audience from game to game, platform to platform, while keeping an open environment for new players to join in? Whoever would like to take that first question. There goes.
I can break the ice on that one. So one of the things that I did when I started with Overwatch was just kind of see what our existing communities at Blizzard were saying about the game. So that helped me understand what exactly it is that draws players from one game to another. Specifically, in the case of Overwatch, it is our shooter, or not. I need to break out of the habit of speaking as a we. So anywho, it was an entirely different genre. So I wanted to see what exactly it was that drew a World of Warcraft player to play Overwatch versus what drew a StarCraft player to play Overwatch, because it was going to be totally different. I couldn't go in with the assumption of everybody's going to go in because it's bright and it's cheerful and it's a Blizzard game. So one of the exercises that I did was kind of build player profiles, understand what it was, what the motivation of a World of Warcraft player was when it came to playing Overwatch, and what the motivation was of a StarCraft player when it came to playing Overwatch. And having those profiles helped helped me understand how exactly I need to speak to these different audiences. And then in the same way, you also want to build that for new players. I had the benefit that when I started with Overwatch, I had never played a shooter. So I was the new player. And so I kind of built that profile based on my own experience of like, I've never played a shooter. Which one is the easiest hero to learn? What exactly is my motivation when I'm coming in there? And yeah, other things that you want to include besides motivations are also their interest. Very important how they communicate and where exactly they are communicating. And once you have all of that done, if you want to take it even a step further, try charting what that player progression is going to look like. When you're a new player in a game, your motivations and your needs are going to be very different than if you're 6 months into playing the game. Mm-hmm. So understanding how that player is going to evolve is going to help you adapt how that messaging is going to look like at every stage of the player's experience through your game.
Edaleen killed it with that answer, to be honest.
I'm like kind of.
I mean, the whole journey, like all of that is really good. I mean, just to add on to that, right? Because so much of it is understanding what is driving their interest. And then where are they in terms of, where are they on the internet? How are they spending their time? In what way are they expecting to hear from us as publishers or developers? I worked on a game called Starlink Battle for Atlas, which was like a children's game. And I had never worked on a children's game before. And it's a totally different world trying to put yourself in the mindset of someone that is a younger audience. There was a Nintendo tie-in to that game, but, someone who's 8 years old may have never heard of Star Fox, and that is just not something that's going to resonate with them. And so thinking about, how are you splitting these messages? How are you creating two different kind of journeys for these players, right? One that is really much more towards folks who are going to be driven by the interesting side that might resonate more with children versus the folks that are those hardcore, Nintendo players like myself, right? Who grew up with that kind of content and can really be driven by nostalgia, and really understanding those two audiences and talking to them differently on their different platforms is just a fundamental part of making sure that you're reaching them where they live.
Yeah. And I think to just kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, working on a title like Doom, it's been around. It was one of the first games I played when I was a kid. And so, especially with legacy titles and Wolfenstein as well, and if I'm not sure if any of you have played Doom Eternal, but it certainly changes. It changes a lot of a lot of what Doom is, and I think it turns a lot of the amazing things even better. But it certainly we worked really hard, especially in the way we communicated with our communities, and the way we kind of like built that hype leading up to the launch of the game. We wanted to walk that line between making sure that the players who have been there since 1993 can really feel like they're playing Doom, but also, maybe the parents who want to buy a game for their kid, or maybe somebody who just walks in and loves shooters, or, some kind of overlap of all of those. So it's definitely tricky, but I think to both of your points about walking the line and meeting our players where they're at, and understanding, what kind of communities, where those communities exist, the ones that are passionate, whether it's mostly on Discord or mostly on Facebook or Reddit. Mm-hmm. I think just like meeting them, on their level, I think that's really important.
I think it's interesting when you're dealing with different types of content, whether you're an entertainment journalist or working in the game industry, you're constantly diving through all these different various social media platforms, trying to get the buzz of what's going on, talking to people. It's learning to navigate Discord, what channels work. What are they talking about? It's the same thing. It's like watching the Pokemon Go community go crazy, especially on community day, how active they are. I always find it fun to see, and then learning how to play, because I think it's similar with, when you're thinking of writing a story of your own, you're coming up with your characters and, what are their interests? What are they into? And it's like trying to find that relatability to the people that you're trying to bring in who are new, and trying to engage people who are existing in the community. And I think it's how you approach it. Edaleen, how you explained that was just terrific. I found that really knowledgeable. Thank you so much. When it comes to, do you have any specific examples of where you and your team made a mistake in messaging in your marketing? I think and in relation to this question, I think everyone always sees the polished typically, and then when there's usually an issue, it's like this whole big thing. So it's have you ever made a mistake in your messaging, your marketing, and how did you guys overcome it? What were some of the positive takeaways? Whoever would like to start on that
I'll go ahead and start. And I wouldn't necessarily label this as a mistake in the messaging, but I think it probably was an opportunity for mistakes to arise. The delay of Doom Eternal was huge for us internally, and it was definitely stressful. And I think in terms of how people receive delays, I think for the most part, I would say most communities see it as a positive thing. Like the mantra is like a delayed game can be good, but a rushed game is always bad. And so I think just leading up to that, I think a lot of us were nervous, but I think one of the important things, and I think this kind of touches on the last question as well, keeping our communities engaged and kind of feeling like fulfilled by the hype of the game. I think a huge part of it is just clarity and just being really communicative and saying, these are the reasons why we want to delay this game. And ultimately it comes down to, it's only going to be a better experience for our players. And so I think just recognizing that while it is disappointing, the ultimate, the end product is going to be better. And I think just communicating that really clearly and not really beating around the bush in terms of how we're communicating, like the specific language that we're using, I think was really important. So again, not necessarily a mistake, but more, I think it was an opportunity for us to like kind of be really upfront and just be very honest. And I think we managed it pretty well.
I think one of the reasons I enjoy the marketing space in games in particular is because every time that there's a mistake or something's not resonating, it's a learning opportunity, right? I mean, there are times where, we might underestimate how important a particular feature will be for, say, the Ghost Recon community or something. And when we see reactions and we see how that content is performing, or we're seeing trends on social, all of that information will just arm us to be better the next time, be it on that title or on another brand in the future. So, I mean, in a weird way, it almost feels like there's so many kind of mistakes, but a lot of them are intentional, right? Like we really do test and try to see what works and what's going to resonate with folks. And a lot of the things that I think happen behind the scenes in terms of content not resonating or marketing message not getting across, it's not the end of the world for us. Oftentimes it's just another opportunity to grow.
I think that's a good. Oh, please, no.
I was just gonna say, I'm kind of drawing blanks, but I'm pretty sure somebody on the internet will be like, "No, here's where you messed up."
Of course.
I think one important thing to understand is that failure is part of the creative process. And in an industry like ours, you need to embrace that you're going to fail. If you're not failing, I would say you're kind of doing something wrong, because it means that you're probably falling back to the tried and true methods as opposed to innovating. That said, I don't recommend everybody try to like face plant as quickly as possible. Whenever mistakes happen, I kind of just try problem solving first. I make sure that I do whatever it is that needs to be done to make sure that the issue is corrected, that the players are happy, and that the messaging has, that the messaging has been adjusted to actually reflect whatever it is that needs to reflect. And then once the players and the community is set, I like to take a look at what exactly went wrong. And this is not about finger pointing. It's kind of just being like, where exactly did we fail? What can we learn from it? What are we going to do so that it doesn't happen again? I'm very fiercely protective of the dev teams that I work with. Like, I am their shield, I am their tank. So I think that in order for them to create their best work, as a community manager, I have to safeguard their happiness and create a safe space for them. So focusing on the lesson that was learned rather than who exactly made the mistake helps create that safe space and helps to keep innovation happening.
Yep. Yeah. It's so important also to make sure that you're learning the right lessons, right? Sometimes something could fail and you might think, oh, well, that's just, that type of content doesn't work. And that might be the exact opposite lesson that you need to learn. Maybe it's a question of timing. Maybe it's a question of platform distribution. Like, there's so many opportunities for you to learn from that. And per Edeleen's comment, like reporting on it, understanding it, analyzing it, like that's just a fundamental part of the whole process.
I was just going to say, I think it would be really fun to have like a brainstorm of all the things we've tried between the three of us, with Edeleen's focus on like Overwatch, the multiplayer, online multiplayer, and like the single player Wolfenstein Doom stuff, and like Ghost Recon. I think it would be a really fun list to go through. I think all of the things we've tried in our work.
I think that's always the interesting thing. It's like I'm learning as more and more content I'm creating. It's learning what's working with the audience, what's not. What did I miss? Did that image work? Did it not? Was the captioning not working with the image? I find interesting examples even on the internet. My Xbox, for example, they came up with a product design and the internet was, refrigerators. So what did they go? They went with it, and now there's this giveaway for a fridge. And it's like, I always grew up with my father always instilled in me, there's no such thing as failure. There's just learning a new way to do things. And if you're not messing up, that means you're not trying. And so I always try to, he's very analytical. My father, works in IT. So everything was, okay, what did you do? What didn't work? So how do you do it better? And I think those are always having that positive mindset is always a way to take a positive takeaway from whatever your strategy is. So you're always learning to adapt and fix and change. So I really appreciate hearing that from others. And for my next question being, how do you personally measure the ROI of your work versus corporate expectations? Whoever would like to answer that.
Tough one.
It is. I know for me, I'm always, for my personal work, it's checking engagement. Likes is, likes. But what kind of messaging am I sending forward? Who's responding? For me, that's been the biggest journey for me in my personal content is, what am I creating that's resonating with someone else, and how are they engaging back with me? I think certain, I guess is the best way to put it, is a certain statistics or certain metrics, like when it comes to likes on Instagram, the algorithm, when they were checking with that, they wanted to do away with likes because they felt it was doing away with causing, for at least for young people, there was this belief that there was affecting mental health because there's so much focus on how many people like this image or how many people like that. And they wanted to test the waters of doing away with that, just so that there's just actual genuine engagement with material. So I found that very interesting. But if that's a question no one wants to touch.
I mean, I can answer it a little bit. I partly goes back to what I was saying earlier about being really goal-oriented for our team. Mm-hmm. We all love big flashy numbers, right? Like if everything was a huge hit and every trailer got millions and millions of views, I would be a very happy content marketing producer. But if I'm going into it feeling confident in the strategy and the groundwork that we've laid, or feeling like, I know that I'm going into this with one goal, but I also want to go above and beyond in other ways, like say, really pushing for audio description in our trailers to make them more accessible to folks who are hard of hearing, for example. That's not necessarily a flashy ROI or KPI that you could put in a PowerPoint presentation. But as long as you're still being goal-oriented, you're still moving towards the KPIs that matter for that particular moment, and you're adding on the things that matter to you and your team, and you're measuring that, then I'm going to feel good about it. I'm going to feel as though I'm making sure that I'm putting out my best effort.
And as far as inclusivity goes, I mean, that's a fantastic example because, that was obviously an experience for you where you could, focus in on a different KPI or, a different metric that wasn't necessarily the flashy ones. But I think that's awesome that you were, able to kind of produce those results. That's great.
And if people are looking at, wanting to understand likes or shares or engagement, I think one very important thing is and going back on Jorge's point about having a goal, is not all initiatives and not everything you post on social media is going to have the same goal. Like if you create something for engagement and you get, 5,000 impressions versus another content that it's more driven towards acquisition and selling games, but that one gets, 1 million impressions. and then you look at the link and you see that you only got 5 sales from that one, even though it got the bigger number, it technically is a failure just because, you know, you only got 5 people to actually go through with the purchase. So understanding what that goal is going to help you look at those numbers and be like, okay, this one was actually more successful than this one, despite the numbers being slightly more impressive on the second one, because this one actually achieved the goal. And then I also had this situation where the full return on investment wasn't actually evident until several months later. So one of the things that I did during my time with the Latin American Overwatch team was I did a behind the scenes series with our talent, and those videos by all means were successful. Like they led to a bunch of articles being written about the actors, and you know, our game appearing on more outlets. They also had a bunch of shares, but then it also 3 months after, I learned that our localization team had actually renegotiated the contract with our vendors, which led to decreased costs for other behind the scenes videos. And those are the type of things that, you know, the goal of those videos was never, you know, negotiate and get a better contract with our with our translators, but it actually led to that. So being able to take that back to, you know, leadership and be like, you know, we're actually saving money now on these initiatives because this contract was done because the videos proved to be successful, is actually a good thing. So if you have something and it turns out that it's moderately successful or not really successful, give it a little bit. Sometimes it's a matter of, you know, letting it breathe for a little while, and then you're able to see, you know, the full effect that it may have had.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. In what ways have you been able to take your Latinx culture and integrate it into your work? For anyone who would like to answer that.
I'll talk about an experience I had. This was, oh gosh, I guess it was like last November-ish, so like just kind of before everything in the world fell apart. But
what fell apart? Maybe I'm missing it.
Oh, have you not heard? No. There was we had an event in Mexico City actually. It was an event that we did. We worked with Xbox in Mexico to hold this event, and it was kind of this huge convention room. It was very reminiscent of like a PAX or you know, more community focused event. Maybe not as big as an E3 or something, but and you know, I was asked if I would want to kind of go down and help out with this event, and you know, we have a team of community folks down there as well, and I think for me, like, that was just one of the coolest experience. I mean, I'm not from Mexico, I'm from Puerto Rico, but just going down there and just seeing how excited people were about Doom Eternal. Like, you know, there was other booths like Gears 5, I think, was there, and some other games as well, and people were going nuts for Doom. And I think it was just this really awesome moment for me where I got to like speak Spanish about Doom to these people who play it and know it really well. And we were talking about like weapon types and different strategies. And I'm like, I mean, I talk about these things all day at work with my friends or whatever, but in English. And so for me, like having that opportunity to you know, just to celebrate such an amazing franchise with people who like speak my language literally and figuratively, that was really, really cool. And it's just, I think it was just emblematic of the fact that, like, you know, I think it's easy to kind of get like this domestic focus, I think, in probably a lot of ways across the industry. And so I think it was a good reminder that, you know, the kind of connection that people have with these franchises is global. It's global. And so that was a really cool experience for me. And I would hope that I get to do something like that again, because it was great.
It's one of the things like I appreciated so much, you know, seeing Miles Morales, you know, that DLC, you know, watching the streamers and seeing the tears and having tears in my eyes, seeing that representation in the games, and just knowing that people are able to, you know, the ones working on the games are able to put that into the games, whether it's part of their culture, you know, they're sharing those communities and just bringing more people in. And it's nice to see where it's in film or in games, to see those representations of culture and being able to share that with audiences, because you're bringing that culture to maybe a household who is not familiar, so I always find that, in, fun. I consider it inclusive, and it's just bringing everyone into that one big happy family. Latinos, we love family and we love community. We like big parties. We like sharing coquito with everybody. So I always find it important, for me, is to bring my culture with me in everything I do, considering my background, everything.
I'd also like to add, I just wanted to say, like, doing this, I think, is a great example of
Yep.
exactly what you brought up, like integrating our culture with our work. Like and I think this falls under the umbrella of like lifting each other up and highlighting the work of people from the Latinx community. I think is so important, and fortunately fairly easy to do. It's a pretty low lift to retweet someone or say, hey, check out
Yep.
this streamer and all the amazing work they're doing. And so I think shining the spotlight where it deserves to be shined, I think is really important. And I think it's what we're doing right now, I think is great.
It's also, there's also always opportunities, right, to be someone's role model. I mean, it's not to say that I'm the best role model in the world for someone who's really interested in games, but I found it to be really rewarding doing like alumni association events, for example, for the Latinx community. There are folks out there who, are fascinated by video games, and they love video games, and they love the way that games tell stories, but the idea of working in that space is just completely alien. Or they think, oh, well, I can't code, therefore there's nothing for me to do in that space, when really there's so many opportunities and so many rewarding paths that they can take within gaming. And being able to remind folks, like, look, this is my path, this is one thing that I've done, but there's a myriad of different ways in, and I can help point you in the right direction, is, I think, one way of really making sure that we're sort of spreading that love.
One of the things I love so much about, for the Latinx Games Festival, getting involved with them, everyone at Latinx in gaming as well. It's, you're seeing your representation of yourself in these industries as well, and finding that sense of community, whether it's the Black, devs of color, you're seeing everyone wanting to bring everyone in with them. That we're not trying to keep a gate from everyone. Here is what we're doing. We want you to be a part of it, sharing this knowledge and having panels, so that people can be a part of these things, learning that those dreams are possible. You're not just a player. You can dream it, you can do it. So again, for me, that is enough of a way of integrating our culture and what we do. So thank you. And leading to Manny's, how he led with that question, was with events and conventions not happening in the near future. What are specific examples, if you can, of how you and your team can overcome these challenges? And what does this look like possibly in the future? I can say, for one example, it's like, here we are, we're on Zoom. Latinx Game Festival is coming to you virtually.
Yeah, I think just kind of recognizing that, no matter how many ways we cut it, we are not able to all get in a room together and celebrate this industry. And so, I'll speak from experience. I think last year I went to QuakeCon, which is, kind of this like BethesdaCon type vibe, and it's super community oriented, and we get to showcase our games, and we get to have panels, and people are just like eating pizza in the BYOC like 24 hours a day. Just like it's just like the most passionate nerd gamer culture, and it's so positive, and it's all in this in at the Gaylord Resort in Texas, and obviously we couldn't do that this year, so we did the virtual thing. We decided to go digital with it, but I think one of the coolest things we did was we kept the BYOC. We kept that. We had like an online 24 hours a day for the duration of that QuakeCon weekend, and we had the crazy silly things that we normally do. We had like a dirty keyboard contest. We had like soda chugging contest. It was all the things that happen in person, and so I think it was really fun to just kind of to still kind of hold that torch, hold that excitement of what QuakeCon is and what it means to us both internally and externally. And so I think it starts with a recognition of like, hey, no matter how many, no matter what we do, we can't be in the same room together. But I think a really close second is really capturing the essence of what makes that event special, whether it's QuakeCon, whether it's BlizzCon, you know, all of these things, all of these events are so unique and impactful. And so I think really just trying to capture that essence and double down on that in whatever format, whether it's digital or otherwise. I think that's a really good starting place.
I'm actually, and it's going to sound odd, but I do miss physical events, but I'm also happy at the success that virtual events have been having. One of the biggest things when I was helping plan BlizzCon, that was the most stressful thing for me, was helping our content creators secure visas. Like, it was a very lengthy and difficult process and heart-crushing to like be, you know, 2 weeks away from the event and to hear no on the visa. So to now have the opportunity to have these events online and, you know, to have these one-on-one interactions with the devs online, because we have been holding summits and whatnot completely online, is actually great, both for the content creators, because they don't have to worry about having to secure visas, but also from, you know, from my team's side, because we're not having to pay that much to bring this experience over to the players. So I am excited that it has proven that, you know, there's still that connection. It's not as, you know, it's not as awesome as a BlizzCon connection, as the connection of having that person right in front of you, but there is still a way of capturing, you know, the magic and how meaningful those moments are. And I am hoping and keeping my fingers crossed that in the future we move to somewhat of a hybrid event where we do have a physical event and a physical celebration and gathering, but we're also having online spaces and the ability to include people from all over the world who may not be able to travel or cannot, you know, secure the visa to travel over to the US.
And that just, I mean, again, going back to inclusivity, like, you know, who can't necessarily afford to fly hundreds of miles and stay in a hotel, like most people, you know. And so I think opening our doors and like, you know, the number of people we had participating in QuakeCon this year was, you know, I would be willing to bet higher, because of the fact that we could just say, hey, it's a free event and it's on the internet, you know. And so I think that's a great point you made, Edaleen. I think it's you know, kind of a hybrid thing. I think could be really, really cool in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, Ubisoft, we've put together 2 Ubisoft Forward events, these online events, sort of, you know, trying our best to replace a little bit some of the celebratory feel that you get at something like E3. But like you said, the reality is, you know, not a lot of people are lucky to make it to E3. And, you know, for years we've been thinking about how do we make the digital versions or the digital spaces where some of these celebrations are taking place meaningful. And I think now the games industry and as a whole is challenged to really take that to heart and really make these as meaningful and rewarding for participants and the community, be that via Twitch drops or remote capture events. And I think for the most part, actually, I'm really impressed. I think the industry as a whole has done a remarkably good job at really catching up. And I think that's not really going anywhere, even when one day, hopefully, if things go back to normal, you know, I think that having that kind of large scale digital presence, I think that's here to stay.
And what does the relationship between content creators, press, and marketing efforts look like in this fast changing industry?
I mean, going back a little bit to the sort of E3 conversation, right? Of like, we want to try to be inclusive. We want to try to bring more people to these opportunities and increase the sort of health of the overall creator ecosystem. I think for us, that means really making sure that we're increasing the diversity of our content creators, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, TikTokers, Instagrammers, wherever they happen to be. And really thinking in the long term as well, right? Like, we really want to make sure that we are laying a healthy groundwork for people who, you know, they're not Pokimane, they're not, you know, the big top tier creators, but nevertheless, they play a fundamental role in, you know, spreading goodwill around our titles, or they genuinely love the game and they're just great ambassadors to those brands. And I think when we think about how to loop in content creators from a PR perspective or a marketing perspective, I think a lot of it is just making sure that we have as healthy and as inclusive and big ecosystems, and it's easy for people to come into those spaces as possible. Sometimes that means developing the tools that we use to reach out to them. Sometimes it means just contracting a greater diversity and inviting more individuals and having more events and you know, it's more work, I think, for all of us, but I think it's really healthy for the long-term space.
And for when it comes to, I know like one of the things that we were always taught is, you know, you can't grow in this industry without continuously learning, because this industry is ever evolving. Which blogs and news sources do you read to stay on top of social media trends and changes?
That's an interesting question. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I personally, like, for years now, I've had gamesindustry.biz. I've had the newsletter on my email. It probably, man, I don't know how many years, but a long time, well before I was at Bethesda. And so I think, you know, and just, you know, one of the kind of jokes I have with friends, it's like, well, like, you know, is it trending? Okay, it's not important to me, but not necessarily to that degree. But I think, you know, Twitter, I think for me is one of the most immediate sources of news and things that are happening. And so you can pretty easily, pretty effectively pick up on what's going on around you in terms of industry trends, or again, going back to that sentiment, I think for me, Twitter is a really, really good one.
I like looking at what other community managers, social media managers are doing, and having been part of you know, a big AAA studio, looking specifically at what indie studios are doing, I think they're doing a lot of great stuff. If I were to like name drop somebody, Victoria Tran, she announced that she's leaving KitFox recently. I think she's doing some really, really cool stuff, and I absolutely love watching her TikToks about the game dev community. So yeah, looking at what smaller studios are doing, I think it's absolutely great, because a lot of the times they're thinking outside of the box. It's very easy for me as part of a big studio to kind of fall into, you know, the usual trends and whatnot. So when I look at indies and I see them up like, hey, they've jumped into TikTok and here's how they're doing it, and you know, here's the things that they're trying, here's the different ways that they're communicating. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from what they're doing.
It's not always something you want to hear as someone who's, you know, quickly approaching middle age, but you know, sometimes you got to hop on TikTok. You got to check out those platforms, see what the kids are doing these days, you know?
It's a really good point. Yeah, sometimes I do feel a little dusty. But I'm like, how do I save the video? All right, never mind. It's okay.
The joy of it.
I know I've been a big fan of like the later newsletters. It's a social media scheduler platform, and I've found their blogs and newsletters really helpful. Public Relations Society of America has a, for if you're a member, they have a lot of webinars that are always available to their members. And then there's also a lot of free content that they do have. They have a physical publication that they send out, strategies and tactics. I'm finding that very informative, and I'm definitely learning a lot from that. And it's just, you know, Hootsuite and Twitter is my big one. As Manny said, I'm always learning so much from everyone, from, you know, learning from Jason Vega. I'm learning from Tara Bruno. I'm learning from Jennifer Vargas. I'm just watching everyone. Manny, I'm watching for you as well. And it's just trying to stay on top of learning and seeing what people are talking about, I think is the biggest way of always knowing what's going on, is being involved in your industry, seeing what everyone is using. And yes, Victoria Tran's TikTok, I'm still learning TikTok myself, but I found it was just so informative and it was fun, and it's always nice. I'm seeing even on Instagram, and people are using Reels similar to TikTok, and then they're using these platforms to promote their businesses, to promote their own communities. And I always have the mindset that, yeah, even if some of these platforms feel even a little young for me, I'm still learning them, and it's just fun to be a part of them. And just to end this tonight, and thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate it. What sage advice would you give yourself right now before you broke in? What kind of advice would you have given yourself?
I would have given myself the advice to not be afraid of data. Like I fought tooth and nail when my manager tried to get me to start looking at spreadsheets. And a lot of that came from thinking, from putting too much importance on just emotion alone. And I do think that that has its time and place, but emotions can change. A player might be upset for 1 hour about something, and then the next hour not really care about it. So I like having a healthy balance of player sentiment and data. And I have found that oftentimes combining the two leads you to more long-term solutions that are healthier, because at the end of the day, it is a business. You do want to make sound decisions. So combining the two is going to lead you to more sustainable decisions.
Yeah, that's a good one. I still am terrified of spreadsheets, by the way, but I'm slowly getting there. I'm coming to peace with them. I would say I guess mine would kind of be twofold. I think I've always kind of believed and thought this, but I think that there's kind of this myth where you just got to be lucky. You got to like right place, right time to break into the industry. And I think while there is an aspect of luck, I kind of have this theory of kind of like manipulating your circumstances so that when luck shows up, you can take advantage of it. And so I think you really need to kind of, you got to go to the events. You got to network with the people. You have to really put in that work. I think luck, for example, for me, luck was, I was scrolling through Twitter at like 1 a.m. some night, and I saw somebody tweet about a position that was open at Bethesda. I was lucky that I saw it right when she tweeted it. That was my luck. But up to that point, I was constantly preparing. I had my my website was like my digital resume. I was going to PAX West to meet Jason Levy, who's now my manager, and I connected all those dots so that when I got lucky, I could really take advantage of it. And so I think a lot of people are scared of that luck thing, and I want to say, like, no, don't be scared of it, but you just have to be ready to harness it when it shows up. And then I would also say, just like continue to network. I think that's so important. And I think it's changed obviously now with the pandemic, of course, but there have been so many people who have gone well out of their way to talk to me and help me understand the industry before I started working. Like I said, Jason Levy, who's now my boss, and Aaron Kaufman, who was at Sony Santa Monica, and he responded to a Twitter DM. And so I would say really just try to connect with the people, especially in community. I think we all like connecting and talking and sharing excitement and joy. And yeah, as long as you're respectful, I think connecting with people and really getting to know them is really important.
Just to add like to, I guess maybe like more personal things, but one is just believing in yourself. Like imposter syndrome is so real, especially as a person of color in this space. So definitely reminding yourself that, if you are passionate and you love what you do, that's going to carry you a long way. And also just be really aware about what drives you. I think, it's really easy to think like that the games industry or this space is something that you want to enter because you love video games. But I think it has to be more than that. I think a lot of it has to be, identifying, are you one of those people that loves data, or do you love community celebration, or do you love testing and learning, or do you love the creative side? Like there's all these different avenues to really dive in. And I think when you figure out what it is that drives you, you're going to be much more successful and eager to invest your time and your heart into diving into that space and getting better and learning and improving and really building yourself out to someone that is going to be an expert in your field.
Well, thank you so much. I think networking is one of the biggest things that anyone can take away from any type of industry. Networking is the biggest one. For me, it is how you meet people. It's how you get your product, or even just yourself. It's how you get yourself in front of people. And it's also a great way to overcome any insecurities or nervousness. I am, as much as I can be very, outgoing at an event, I'm also very, very shy. And for me, it was getting involved in contract work was my best friend, especially in the industry and games events. It was my way of learning what it was like to, what it takes to put an event together It was also learning how to interact with, the community that you were bringing into those events. And so I was always grateful for the contract work that I would get, whether it would be at Square Enix, helping out with Deep Silver at E3 one year, just these little things. And then all the people that I met engaging with on Twitter, talk to people, DM, ask a question, get involved in mentorships, get involved with communities on Discord. So for me, it was always tell myself, it would be my younger self, is not be so afraid, not be so shy, push myself. And I know it's, for some, it's not as easy as it may sound. It's definitely a challenge. But the more you network, the more doors you open for yourself, the more, and even if it doesn't work out for you, hey, I know this person, you're looking for this. So it's another way to engage with others, because you're always constantly in this vacuum of knowledge. You're always learning something. And no matter who you meet along their way, there's always someone you can refer someone to. So that's pretty much it. So I want to thank everyone here today for joining me, Jorge, Edaleen, and Manny. I learned a lot from you guys today, and I hope that everyone else will too. And thank you for joining us at the Latinx Game Festival. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Take care.